Graph Editor is a fantastic tool. It allows you to do things with keyframes that are otherwise quite difficult to do in keyframe view. Sometimes it gives you another option, another way of doing things. And we're going to open up the Graph Editor AEP project, and you can find that in Fine-Tuning Animation. And if you open up 04 Drink 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 composition, you'll see I've created this little animation of the logo here. Now, if I wanted to retime this, you'll notice that I have some eased keyframes in there. So if I was to drag, for example, the last two keyframes out, I'd then have to adjust this one as well. Or if I drag them as a group, it might affect the overall timing. So you want a way of being able to easily retime this as a group. Now you can make a selection, hold down the Alt key and click and drag. And what that will do is that will scale the timing for you. You see it's increasing the spacing evenly between keyframes so we can make the logo bounce happen a lot more slowly, but still keep the relative timing. In fact, I need to slow it down a little bit more. So what we're going to do is have a look at an alternative way of doing it using the Graph Editor. So let's open up the Graph Editor. Let's select Scale, and notice it puts a bounding box around Scale. If we then select Rotation as well, and double click, we should get a bounding box around both of them. And then we can actually use the bounding box just to scale the animation in. So you select both properties, then double click the properties to create the bounding box. And that does the same thing, just allows you to scale up an animation over time. So in the Graph Editor, let's open up another composition. Let's open up this one here. I've got one called 06 Can Animation. And in here I have this little can that was rendered in 3D. And if we preview that, you'll notice that it rotates between 6 and 8 seconds. What I want to do is have it kind of looking as if it's walking into the scene between 0 and 4 or 6 seconds. So what I'm going to do is animate the rotation. Now at the moment it's rotating around its center point. You'll see that the anchor point is in the middle of the layer. Now I can move the anchor point by using the Pan Behind tool. And what the Pan Behind tool allows me to do is drag the anchor point wherever I want it to be. Now you'll notice this is a 3D layer, so it has a 3D axis showing the X, Y, and Z value. We'll have a look more at 3D later. But for now, just click on the center and just drag that down to the bottom. Now you'll notice as we scrub through that now changes the rotation. So this is important. If you adjust the anchor point value using the Pan Behind tool, after you've created some keyframes, it will affect your animation. So we're going to leave that for now and come back to that a bit later. But for now, let's select the Z rotation value and go into the Graph Editor. And you can see here my rotation keyframes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change the type of graph. At the moment, it's a speed graph. I want it to be a value graph. And it's now going to show me how much it's rotating over time instead of the timing. And I can use this value graph to add keyframes. In fact, I can draw keyframes on the value graph. So I select the pen tool and I can just click in here and add keyframes. So if I want it to rotate backwards and forwards, I can just create a few keyframes. Now, I could be very precise with them, or I can just roughly place them where I want them to be. If you don't believe they're keyframes, jump back to the keyframe view and you can see that I've actually drawn keyframes in the timeline. Great thing about that is now I can go and select the selection tool and just drag these up. So let's drag them to the 200 mark. Now I could multiple select them. So we'll hold down the Shift key, and as I add every second one to the selection, you'll notice it places a bounding box around them. And then I can just move them up to the 200-degree mark. And if we preview that very, very quickly, I've created this animation where it's rotating backwards and forwards, which looks a bit bizarre. And then it continues to do the full rotation there. Now this is really powerful. You'll notice that at the moment it's going between 0 and 200. I don't really want that. I want it to be going backwards and forwards evenly, with 0 being the center point. So what I can now do is select all of those rotation keyframes And you'll notice that the graph is displaying between 0 and 300. But if I click and drag this free transform box, I can hold down Shift after I start dragging and just make sure that it's halfway between 100 and minus 100. And you'll see that it updates the graph. And now if I preview it, it's going side to side. Now it's a little bit too much for me, so if I scale it down, I can scale it down from the top to the bottom. Just scale it down a little bit. Okay, and there's various modifiers I can hold down. If I hold down the Command key before I start scaling, it will scale around that 0 point. So it will go to between 50 and minus 50 or thereabouts. And if I preview that, I've just reduced the amount of animation. In fact, I could do that a bit more. So hold down the Command key or Control key on Windows. Okay, so it's starting to look more like it's kind of walking. I could afford to drag it down a little bit further. If I want it to hold on each point, what I could do is do an easy ease from here. So I click on easy ease, and that gives me an ease on each of the keyframes. I can also adjust the ease by dragging the handles out, and with them all selected, it does them all simultaneously. So then I get a much more dynamic kind of left and right movement, as if it's really walking towards the camera. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of this last keyframe, don't really want that, and I'll get rid of the one before it. I can also create loops, so if I select all of the keyframes again, I can copy them, so Command C or Control C on Windows, move to the last keyframe, and just paste them. And that way I can extend the animation a little bit further if I want to. Slight change of timing here, so I would just go in there and hand tweak that so that the shape looks right. So you're kind of adjusting the timing visually by using the graph editor, which I really like. Now the other thing that we want to do is maybe reduce the amount it moves over time. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit from the timeline as far as I can. And what I want to do is be able to grab the end handles of this. Now you'll notice when I've got too many keyframes, I can't do that. So I'm just going to undo to where I had one group of keyframes. And what we'll do is we'll scale it down. Now if I scale it doing this, I'm scaling the duration and the values at the same time. Okay, because if I do that, I'm just going to make the animation shorter. Okay, so it'll move faster now. So now if I copy and paste those keyframes, I have enough time to see the entire animation. So just backtracking a little bit there, just to give myself a little bit more space. So now I have all of those, I can select them. And again, if I start to drag here, but hold down some modifier keys before I drag instead of dragging, I can hold down Command and Alt. And what that allows me to do is scale the amount that it's wobbling over time. So it can start off with a very extreme wobble and gradually get less as it comes towards the camera. And we can start to fade out the wobble that way. Again, that's something that would be really difficult to do using keyframes. You see it just gradually comes to a halt. So the only thing left to do now really is to scale it down. So again, what we're going to do is hold down Command and Alt or Control Alt on Windows, just scale that down towards the end so we're getting a very gradual tail off. And then we're going to add the scale property to this. So with the layer selected, we can hold down Shift S to bring up scale, click to create a keyframe for scale, and you'll notice that you can see the keyframe down here in the timeline. So at the moment it's at 29%. I can drag that over to the 6-second mark if I want to. If I want to see both properties, I can click to select scale, shift click to select rotation as well, and just move that keyframe so it lines up with the end of my rotation keyframes. And then all I need to do is think, okay, where do I want to start the scale value at? Now I could just click to create a keyframe, again using my pen tool, select the selection tool, and then just drag it down. Okay, again, it gives me a really visual way of doing that. So if we take it all the way down to there, preview it, we've now got the can kind of walking towards the screen. Kind of. It's kind of a nice effect, I think. Quite a nice effect. And again, at any time, if I need to adjust that, just double click. Let's pull that. Whoops. Make sure you don't select one of the handles accidentally when you're dragging the free transform box. We could also maybe adjust position. So let's bring up position, Shift P. So we'll set a keyframe for position. Select all the properties. Okay, and this is where we want the position to end. So we should really drag our position keyframe to here. And then at the beginning, we might just adjust the position value manually, for example, just by clicking and dragging it up. Or we can go into our position property and adjust the Y position value just to move it up the screen a little bit. And you'll notice with position, we have an X and Y value, so it separates the X and Y as I drag. So red represents the X value, green represents the Y value, and blue represents the Z value. So there we have it, some tricks that you can do with animation and the graph editor. So have a play around with this and see what you can come up with in terms of ideas for this little animated can.